Hello, and happy marvelous Monday, everybody. I hope that you are well. I'm super excited that you are joining me today. I'm super excited because we have a special guest who will be chiming in on the conversation pertaining to domestic violence. Many of you who've been following me, you already know that October is also Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And so my special guest today is none other than Keith Childs. He's a real estate investor. He's a property management professional who has been in the industry for almost 3 decades. And so I'm excited to have him chime in on this discussion because this is something that I believe a lot of people may not be aware of. If you are a landlord, if you know someone who is a landlord or a tenant, please share this broadcast with them. We hope that something that is shared today will be helpful to the rental community as a whole. I am your host. I'm Karissa Spann, the landlord and tenant coach. This is what I do each and every Monday at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. One of the things that I always do is I ask to know where my viewers are watching from because I love to give information. And we know that from one jurisdiction, from one state or city to the next, that the laws are going to be different. And so if you wouldn't mind, please let me know in the comment section where you're tuned in from, whether you're a landlord or a tenant. Please also let me know. I just want to say thank you to all of you who are watching live by way of Facebook, by way of LinkedIn, or YouTube. If you have not already subscribed to my YouTube channel, please catch me on YouTube and smash that subscribe button so that you'll be the first to know when I am live and online. And so without further ado, I want to bring in my guests on today. This conversation is, I believe, is going to be an eye opener for a lot of people. And so I'm excited to bring back my special guest. He's been on before. He's no stranger to property management, real estate. And many of you have probably already watched a previous session where Keith Childs was on with me. And so if you have comments, if you have questions, remarks, or observations, please drop it in the comment section. I'm now going to ask Keith Childs to join us. Please pay special attention to the information that's shared today. Don't be a stranger. Ask as many questions that you feel is necessary. All right, so let me bring on Keith. Hello, Keith.
Hey, Karissa. Hello. How you doing today?
Happy Monday, big brother. How are you?
Quite wonderful. Thanks for having me. How's everything going?
Keith, I'm so excited to have you today. I want you to just I want you to introduce yourself to the viewers, let them know more about you, why you're joining us today, and then we'll get into the discussion. Is that all right?
Absolutely. Well, hello, everyone. Just wanted to come on, and today actually is a very, very important podcast for us to do today together, because we're speaking about domestic violence. And before I get into that, I just want to let y'all know, as Karissa already introduced, my name is Keith Childs. I've been in the property management field almost, like you say, 3 decades. Wow, over 20, going on 25 years or more. Worked with A, B, and C and D class properties, so I've seen a little bit of everything. I reached out to Karissa, I think last month, and she agreed to speak, to allow me to speak, because I actually personally just went through a terrible domestic violence issue about a month and a half ago, maybe 2 months ago. And going through that, it really touched home, that it's a lot of young women individual, women out there that that goes through domestic violence on a daily basis, and a lot of the cries are not being heard. So I wanted to come on. I wanted us to talk about this conversation because I don't think it's enough information out there for us landlords like myself, and just for the tenants, for someone out there listening to this, maybe hear this, or a landlord or tenant that we hopefully we can drop some information that can help you in your situation. So with that, I'm pleased that Karissa allowed me to come over here today and we can have this discussion.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Keith. Let me just acknowledge some important people who have joined us today. I want to say hello to Anthony Motley. Keith, he's watching by way of our LinkedIn channel. So much support from Anthony Motley. Love and appreciate you, sir. We have Jamie who is watching. She's watching on YouTube from DC. Amity is watching from Seattle, Washington. And so we have different regions watching on different platforms. And again, I just want to say thank you so much for tuning in today. And so today is all about domestic violence. Keith, I know that when we talked, you shared information, something that happened to you with one of your rental properties. Hey, Ms. Davis, thank you so much for tuning in from YouTube. And so, Keith, before we get into the discussion, I want you to prepare, to share your information. Hey, Shantae, thank you so much for tuning in on the LinkedIn channel from Maryland. So, Keith, I want you to be prepared to, before we bring this to a close, just
Okay.
make sure that you have your information available if people want to reach out to you. So Keith, you and I, we both have been in the industry for a long time. You've been in the industry for almost 3 decades. I've been in the industry for almost 30 years myself in various roles and capacities in property management and real estate. And Keith, one of the things that I've always said is that there's not a lot that surprises me because I've worked in different, such as yourself, I've worked in different areas of real estate, right? And property management, whether it's low income housing, tax credit, affordable housing, market, luxury, rental communities in different jurisdictions. But the one thing that I can honestly say, Keith, is that domestic violence doesn't have a face. It doesn't matter if the tenant or the rental property is in the DC metropolitan area or Seattle, Washington, or South Carolina, right? Domestic violence doesn't really have a face. And so I want you to share the story that you have talked about that happened at your property. So can you talk to me and our viewers a little bit about that, please?
Absolutely. Um, like I said, I don't know the exact day, but it was about maybe 2 months ago. Not over 2 months ago. The young lady, and it's ironic. I just kind of just met her, maybe say previous, 3 weeks prior, 2 weeks prior. I was doing a home inspection and met her. I knocked on her door, and I remember her being, it took her a good little while to open, but I didn't pay that no mind. It didn't connect for me. Nevertheless, the young lady, I found out some background information on her. One of my colleagues was like, yeah, she's going through a domestic violence situation with her baby father. So immediately I got, I was intrigued, and then I got concerned about her because I heard the background on that she had went to the police to get a restraint order. She actually tried to go stay with some family members, and I don't know what happened with that. Evidently, I don't know if the baby father came down there and caused so much ruckus. They told her she had to leave. Maybe, I'm not sure. But she ended up back, and then she even went to. And I'm telling you I'm going through this whole process because it touched me that she reached out to her caseworkers and everything. So she tried everything she could to get away from this guy or to put some space between her, but not, being on a system, on a spectrum of, on housing and assisted living, and with 5 kids, not really having the capital, just up and leave. She's kind of almost stuck. But while she was there in that situation, unfortunately, her baby father came in one day, forced his way in, abused her in front of the kids, and shot her and killed her in front of their kids. And it just shook me to the core because the first thing I thought was the system failed her. that's how I felt, I felt like, because I saw a young lady that was crying out, that was trying to leave, that was trying to get away, did everything that everyone told her to do, and yet still she lay dead on her bedroom floor from a gunshot wound. So, and then it's immediately when I kind of put that out there and talking to some people, and I've heard all of these stories about countless stories of stuff going on, and then it just really made me realize, Karissa, that even in my properties, I noticed that a lot of young girls go through domestic violence. Maybe not to the end with this young lady, in the hope they don't meet that demise, but it's really got to be something that be talked about, because speaking to a few that's going through it or went through it and going through it, they don't feel like they have any help. So hopefully us as landlords, the little bit we can do, I've had since then put stuff together for the all my new move-in packages, to put some information in for call numbers, domestic violence numbers, stuff like that. But every little bit of help. I don't have all the answers. That's why I'm glad we come together in a forum like this. And I'm
Yeah.
thank you, Carissa, for putting this together, because this need to be talked about, because a lot of women, unfortunately, meet a demise and they just stuck. They have nowhere to go, nowhere to turn to. And, they talk about the restraint order when you go to the police. That's a piece of paper that don't hold these people back, unfortunately. And in this situation is so everything is done, nothing is done pre, everything is done post, and post can mean too late for a lot of people. So Karissa, I definitely wanted to just put that out there, and kind of throw it out to you, throw it out to your audience, and like, what can we do as landlords, from a little perspective of landlord, that we don't cross the line, if there is a line that we don't cross, but we doing everything we can to help someone that may be going through that.
And that's a good point, Keith. And you touched on quite a few things. I want to come back and speak to that. But and again, thank you for those of you who are watching. Thank you for those who are just tuning in. We're talking about domestic violence. And so Domestic Violence Awareness Month is October. It was launched nationwide in October 1987. And the reason it was launched because it is essentially to raise awareness about domestic violent issues. And unfortunately, domestic violence, it doesn't have a face, it doesn't have an age, it doesn't specifically have a gender. And so we're talking about this situation, Keith, with your tenant who, unfortunately lost her life due to domestic violence. I have had several tenants of mine, and they were in a similar situation. And, fortunately for them, their life wasn't lost, but it ended up in a very bad situation.
Right.
So it is important to share this information. We want people to know that there are resources available. But Keith, the unfortunate thing, one of the things you touched on is that there's not enough to help some of these residents or tenants in advance, right?
Mm-hmm.
Some people can be helped while others cannot. And so I want to talk about that because I noticed that you have started to change your business practice, right? So you mentioned how in your lease up package, meaning that when a tenant comes to you, when they sign the lease, you put information in their welcome package. And I want to talk about that. I want landlords to know and understand that they could, um, share information and share resources, and then also let them know where to get that information from. But Keith, what made you decide to put that information or literature or resource, if you will, in your lease up package when it comes to tenants moving in?
Well, just the overwhelming, after I kind of dove into the situation, after that unfortunate situation happened, the overwhelming response I got from young ladies that shared with me openly that they have been going through, getting pushed around or beat up or knocked against the head, and just not feeling safe, and a lot of times, when you're in it like we deal with so many. I have 13 buildings, and 36 units and over. So when you deal with all these different tenants, it's hard to take that personal approach a lot. But we have to stop. And I told myself I had to stop in the moment and say, look, I have three daughters, and I feel anytime, that one of them young women could be my daughter, and unfortunately that they got to go through that. So I told myself, what can I do? you know, I would love to think of something that we can do that's a that's kind of in front of it, catch the stuff before it escalate to this point. And another thing, Karissa, is, that old saying, if you see something, say something. We have to get that mindset. A lot of us in this day and time, we just want to step aside and mind our business and not feel like we, in other people's business. And adding to that, adding to that, that see something, say something, I know we're in that gray area, right?
Yeah.
Because then you get to the point where you feel like you say something, and then the next day he's right back over there, right? So we like, look, you crying for help. We go through these channels to get you help, and then it look like he's right back. But we have to know that this situation is like an onion. It has layers.
Yeah.
What we may see with our visual eyes may not be what's really hidden deep inside. And what I mean by that is a lot of these women be scared. They're fearful of these because these guys are bullies. These people bullying them, and they fear. So though they may try to go on and, oh, he okay, he's there. That's because they know if they say something different, they fear violence. So it's touchy. It's a very touchy situation, because if the police or somebody get involved and the young lady decides she don't want to press charges or she want to protect them, she could protect them out of fear. So, it's tough. I don't know. I just say, for us as landlords, we just, if we see something, say something, and give information out. And it's hopefully, and it's pray that it don't get to the situation that I had to go through, where you see somebody lose their life.
And I'm wondering, and I see your question. Hey, Craig, thank you so much for tuning in. And I'm wondering, as I'm looking at Craig's question, he's asking what resources are available for us as tenants, he meant as landlords, to share with tenants. That's a great question, Craig. As a matter of fact, let me answer that. As a matter of fact, I'm going to bring up a number. So there's some things that we can do. And there's some information that we can share. So let me answer that question now. So Craig, here is a number. This is a National Domestic Violence Hotline number. So if you are a landlord, please take this information. Please share this information. Please hold on to it. Maybe incorporate some of the methods that Keith shared, right? So Keith talked about how he include this information in his lease up packet. So that means when we get an applicant, okay, so I'm gonna walk some of you through the process, because I know that some watching, may watch the replay, may not be a landlord, or may have a property manager who manages the property. And so they may not fully understand all the steps in the process to getting a tenant. So I'm gonna start at the beginning. I'm gonna slow walk it to the point of it being a landlord and tenant relationship, and at what point you should share this information. So when you have a rental property, a vacant property available for rent, whether you're renting it out or you have a property management company, a real estate agent, or broker, they'll usually go through the application process with prospects, people who are interested in the rental property. So that's the prospect section. The applicant section, or applications, they're coming in. That's when landlords should be conducting a background check to find out who's best qualified to rent the rental property. That could include or consist of checking credit, checking income, verifying if the particular tenant may be in any type of housing program, whether it's a Section 8 program or rapid rehousing program. There are a lot of resources available, whereas tenants are able to rent property, and maybe the government or some agency would subsidize the rent, even with veterans. Okay, so at the point where the landlord makes a decision to rent to tenants, so now they've gone through the prospect selection, they've gone through the application process, they are chosen to rent the property. But before they sign the lease, this is where you want to provide all the resources. So Keith, my lease up package, my lease up package, when the tenant signs a lease with me, right?
Right.
Property that I manage, the lease package is at least 61 pages long. And
Wow.
Keith, you did that because I understand that it's a business.
Right.
And you already know that if it's not in writing, you cannot enforce it, right?
And you know it.
And so when my tenants sign a lease, so when tenants sign the lease with Keith and others who are knowledgeable about these sort of matters, we're going to provide this information. We're going to provide this national domestic hotline number. We're going to give them resources in the jurisdiction or the community where that rental property is. All right. So that goes to Craig's question. And here's the second thing, Keith. I recently learned that people could text SMART to this number here, 88788. So if you have this information, or maybe someone, if you're a tenant watching, right, and you feel like you need help and you don't want to call, you can text that number. And so as a landlord, please share this information. Please share these resources. If you are a housing professional, I know that some are watching, some that are going to watch the replay are not landlords, Keith, but they are service providers with tenants who are possibly in some sort of housing subsidy program. Please share this with your tenants or with your clients so that people will have this information. And then also, Keith, I want to share this because this goes back to Craig's question. It doesn't really matter where the rental property is. Landlords should Google domestic violent resources. So, for instance, if I'm looking for resources for my tenants in Washington, D.C., I'm going to do a Google search, domestic violent resources in D.C. If I'm looking for assistance or resources for my tenants in Virginia, I'm going to look up my Google search, domestic violent resources in Virginia. So be very specific with your search, and it's going to pull up a list of all the places that are available. So it's no way, Keith, that we could really share like all the resources because we have a wide range of viewers from the West Coast to the East Coast.
Right.
You are a landlord, even if you're a tenant, or you are, you know somebody who need assistance. Look this information up. All right.
Hey,
So,
Karissa, I'm sorry. Let me just kind of just jump in real quick.
Go ahead.
On the national domestic violence hotline, they have a website, www.ndvh.org. Is that just locally or is that national? That's everywhere.
That's a national.
That's a national, okay.
Yeah, that's national. And so what I want people to understand is that, and although there's a national hotline, there are also local resources available. So you have national resources, you have local resources available. And so there, like I said, Keith, there are a lot of resources that people don't know, whether it's DC, it's Maryland, it's Seattle, Washington, it's Virginia. There are so many resources available in the community, and a lot of people don't even know that they are available. And so I did want to share that information. And so that answers Craig's question.
Right. And also, Karissa, let me add that another thing that I've done since the situation is in, I like the way it's going. What I've done now is put together a community partnership with the local police station. And I found that to be really, you go over there, you find out who the liaison is, who they outreach for your area, and you build that relationship with that police station. And that's also that, because now if you got that one or two people that you can talk to, or whoever the point of contact is, you can also share that with a tenant that you might think be going through something, because now they got someone directly they can speak to. The person may can come visit them. That may deter some stuff as well. You know what I'm saying? It don't always have to be a 911. You can build that community relationship with that police station or that officer, or whoever is running that division. Because in most police stations, they have an outreach division. You just got to find out who that person is. I know in Washington, D.C. they do. You have to find out who that person is so you can, that may be another way as well.
And that is a good point. Let me go to Jamie's comment. Jamie said that her comment is that always have an alarm system in the house.
Great.
That's a good point. Yes. I know that a lot of rental providers will make sure that an alarm system is in the house. Craig said, thanks for the information. You're welcome, Craig. It's our pleasure. All right. So Jamie, you said, yes, I've had a tenant that experienced domestic violence. Thanks for having this discussion. Yes, that's great to share that information. And so, Keith, I just want to go back to your comment about reaching out to the local police department. That's so important. As a matter of fact, I shared that same information with someone maybe about a few weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
I was on, they had me as a special guest, and I just gave general information. They had a lot of complaints about the violence and what was going on in a particular apartment building in the community. I think that some people feel like their only option when it comes to law enforcement is to call 911. But that's so not true. You can go above and beyond. And so, Keith, in the rental community that I've managed, I think it was approximately 272 apartments in that community that I managed.
Mm-hmm.
And it was in a high crime area. It was a problem property. And so one of the things that I did was I reached out to the local PSA commanders in that jurisdiction. I requested that there be more police presence in the community. So they actually came out, and I actually walked the community with law enforcement officials. And so sometimes it may require landlords, owners, or property managers to come out of their comfort zone. And sometimes, Keith, people are not, they're not, they're not comfortable. Some housing providers, they're afraid, not just the community, but the things that are going on in these rental properties. And so in order to get results, sometimes it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be comfortable. But sometimes, like you said, Keith, if you see something, say something. It's not just, but sometimes it's not just enough to say something. You have to really take action. And so that was a good point. So thank you for sharing that, Keith.
You're welcome.
Let me go to some of the questions that have come in, Keith.
Okay.
All right. One of the questions, and I touched on this last week. So what should landlords do if their tenant is a victim of domestic violence? I touched on this a little bit last week. And so if you're a landlord and you have a tenant who has experienced some sort of domestic violent situation and they ask you in writing to change the locks, please make sure that you do that. You want to do that, especially, like I said, if it's in writing, because that creates a paper trail. I can only imagine worst case scenario where a tenant contacts their landlord, requests in writing that the landlord changes the locks, and the landlord doesn't change the lock. And then something really bad happens.
Yeah.
Right. And so if tenants are reaching out to landlords, it's always in the landlord's best interest, even if they don't want to get involved, do the minimum, change the locks, right? And so then the question came up, well, Karissa, if I change the lock, who's going to be responsible for paying for the locksmith services? Well, if the tenant doesn't have the money, then the landlord, as a landlord, you can go ahead, take on that cost, right? If it's $45, if it's $75, whatever the locksmith service is, pay the fee, invoice the tenant, give the tenant ample time. Usually on average, I would say somewhere around 45 days is ample time to allow the tenant to either make the payment in full or allow them to enter into a repayment agreement.
The worst thing you want to do, Karissa, I'm going to add in that is the worst thing you want to do is ignore it. You don't ignore that. Yeah.
That's so true. Hey, Joe, thank you so much for tuning in. So Joe is in the industry in the DC metropolitan area. Here's his comment, Keith. Relationship with local police is really useful for helping victims get a restraining order and enforcing it. Police can also be present to assist when the couple separates and do what's called assist with clothing, when the offender picks up his or her stuff from the unit. Joe, thank you so much for sharing that. Joe is, I can appreciate Joe. I've worked with Joe over the years. He is a consultant. And I know that Joe has an extra. Keith, do you know Joe Belfiore? Have you heard that name before?
I can't. Not. I can't say that I have, and I can't see. I'm so blind, so I can't see. It's so little, but yeah, I can't say that I
So,
have.
so Joe is he's really big in the DC metropolitan area. He does
Okay,
a lot of consulting. I've worked with Joe over the years, and I promise that he is a wealth of information. And so, if you
oh,
need
great.
services, Joe, put your information in the comment section. If you have an email address, if people in the DC metropolitan area can reach out to you for some consulting services. As a matter of fact, Joe, I'd like to have you on maybe next week to just touch on this a little bit more. And so, Keith, I think that, like you said, working with law enforcement, that's so beneficial. But worst case scenario, a tenant contacts their landlord, they do nothing, and something bad happens.
Yeah,
The liability, that could come with that would not be good.
and then I'm gonna just throw the other side out, Carissa, for the to you in the audience. So you want to take that first? Somebody put a
Go ahead.
question.
We'll come back to that. Go ahead.
Okay. Um, when it, I guess, because I've seen this too. When you know, when you practically know that a tenant is being abused, and they're afraid to come forward, and you see them, black eyes hurting, and you hear what's going on around on the neighborhood, you see it on camera, but they won't, the tenant, because they so afraid, they won't say nothing because they're afraid of them. Then on a landlord, that's the part. What could we do? Is anything that we can do at that point? And are we overstepping our boundaries when you see the person is being abused and being hurt? Or do that's the part, when the tenant don't want to cooperate because of fear. It may be, we look at it, oh, well, she's still with him, probably because she's terrified of him, but nobody is there to help her. So that's why, that's a really a sticky situation to try to solve.
It is, and that's a great question. And so to that, I would say that, like you said, if you see something, say something. But Keith, let's say we go ahead and we call the police, right?
Mm-hmm.
Police, they show up. Um, they're trying to investigate to find out what happened. And if the tenant is so afraid that they don't want to press charges, or let's say, for instance, and this happened to me where one of my rental properties, I think, Joe, you're familiar with this property where the tenant, the boyfriend busted out all the windows.
Mm-hmm.
So we had to replace the windows. They were not cheap. The tenant did not provide us with the boyfriend's information. It was the child's father, right? So we spent the money to replace the windows. The boyfriend came back and did the same thing again.
Mm-hmm.
And this tenant refused to give information because she wanted to protect the child's father. So
At the beauty.
not only did the boyfriend bust out all the windows, but he beat her up really bad. Like, she had a black eye. We talked about the black eye. We talked about the abuse. And so what can be done?
Mm.
Um, can landlords do anything if tenants are not cooperating? Well, we can't make people cooperate.
Mm.
And that's why we want people to know that there are resources available. If you feel like your life is in danger, if you don't feel safe, please make sure that you understand that resources are available. The best thing for a person to do is to get help and to try to escape that situation. But Keith, unfortunately, we cannot force people to receive help.
Right.
And that's the unfortunate part about it, that, sometimes people are really, really afraid that they don't want anything worse to happen. So they protect the abuser, they
Right.
protect the offender, and they continue to stay in those situations. And so it's really a tough situation.
Mm.
But that's a really, really good question. So let's go to this question here. Should you change the locks even if both are on the lease? That's a great question. And so if a tenant is reaching out to you, asking or demanding that you change the lock, in writing, I will go ahead and change the lock. And now here's the thing, because one of the questions that came up, can you evict the tenant? Right. So let's say the police comes out, there is a civil protection order or a temporary protection order in place. That usually mean that the individuals have to split, right? So it could be the tenant, it could be the offender, whether it's the boyfriend or the girlfriend, because it's not all males, sometimes it's females, right?
Right.
So if there's a protective order in place and they have to stay away from each other, um, sometimes landlords will not enforce the lease by taking the tenant to court, right? But in this situation where both people are on the lease and the tenant is requesting the locks to be changed, I will go ahead and change the lock. Allow them to determine who's going to get the key. If there's a protective order, allow them to mediate that in the court system, right? But
Mm-hmm.
as long as it's in writing, the tenant has made the request, I would say go ahead, definitely change the locks. And so it's really a sticky situation, but when there's a protective order that's in place, then now you can say, okay, well, yes, we're changing the order. The tenant requested the locks to be changed. The police has been contacted because you want to make sure that this tenant is protected and feels safe.
But
Great.
that brings up a very good question. You know, my mind be all over the place, right, Karissa? So that brings up a very good point. If in that situation, if two individuals on the lease and they get a protective order and you change the lock, do that dismiss the financial responsibility from that tenant? Now they can't live there anymore. Are they off the lease, and do the other person have to qualify by themselves, or how does that work? Or do the other person that's now can't get access still responsible for that unit?
That's a great question. So you've changed the lock. They
Mm-hmm.
are still legally bound to the terms of that rental lease agreement until they are removed from the lease. So just because you change the lock doesn't mean that they're removed from the lease.
Right.
Now, in order for that to happen, Keith, you would have to issue another lease without that person's name on it. But that's a completely different process.
Mm-hmm.
But to answer your question, they are still on the lease. They just don't have access to the rental property.
Mm-hmm. That's very interesting. Okay.
Thank you so much, Sybil, for tuning in from South Carolina. I'm gonna go to here's Joe's information. Um, Joe Belfiore is in the DC metropolitan area. Keith, take his information down. Anybody who needs
So
consulting
well.
services, Joe is very knowledgeable. He has helped me out with several properties, several issues that I've had with tenants over the years. And I promise you will not be disappointed. Anybody in the DC metropolitan area, this is Joe's information. Um, His website is securitysolutionswork.com. His email address is also listed on the screen. Please reach out to him. Let him know that you got his information from watching us today. All right, so let me go to Joe's comment. One tip, always file a police report. That's so important. So Keith, unfortunately, we know that everybody do not file a police report, right?
Right.
But when things happen at the property, so I had a situation where the tenant came to the office. This is a different situation that happened. The tenant came to the office. The boyfriend followed. She did not want to have the person arrested. I called the police while they were in the office. I told them that I was calling the police. The police came out, and I gave them all the information that I knew
Mm-hmm.
because at some point somebody has to document it, right?
Right.
And so filing a police report is the first step to creating a paper trail. When did it happen? Who were involved? What time of the day? What did they have on? What was the outcome? Do you know where they live? And all the other information that they're asking for the police report, whatever you have provided, no matter how much or how little, that's the first step to creating a paper trail. All right. So Joe said, if the tenant is uncooperative and won't identify the offender, the landlord is also a complainant with destruction of property like the windows or the doors in any common area, especially. So in that situation where I called the police, I initiated the paper trail. So if I have to take the tenant to court because of the damage to the rental property, now I have that police report, that documentation to back up why I'm taking the tenant to court for the damage to the property.
Right.
Because some landlords, they're asking, well, Karissa, can I evict? Can I take my tenant to court for domestic violence and the things that are happening at the property. You absolutely can when there is damage and it's in the lease. You have a paper trail. You can't take somebody to court off of something that doesn't exist. If it's not in the lease, if you have no documentation, you cannot enforce something that does not exist. So please make sure you have it in your lease. Make sure you have the police report. Make sure that you have pictures. You know, I'm big on pictures, Keith, and video, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So you can document all of those things.
Right.
All right, here's another comment by Craig. Another concern is when the domestic violence spill over and impact other tenants living on the property.
Great point. Great point. Yeah, that's a great point. And that happens a lot. That's usually that's who we get our first information from. If the tenant don't come forward, the neighbors complaining. I don't know if any of you all watched the Jeffrey Dahmer madness, but the neighbor next door was complaining about the smell, so it's kind of the same thing. You get the neighbors hear all the knocking and bumping around and crying and kids crying. So they, and it's disturbance, and it's not fair to the neighbors. They got to go through that, when they're trying to sleep and go through stuff. So yeah, that's a good point. That's another reason why we need to make sure that we're protecting not only the tenants, but the neighbors.
Absolutely. Because unfortunately, if it's not corrected, right? And especially if it's a repeat offender. And if a landlord doesn't address it, does nothing to correct it, it's sending the message that it's okay, it's acceptable, right? And so tenants will usually respect a landlord who rule with an iron fist, meaning that they are a landlord, a property manager, a housing provider that cares about the property. They don't hesitate to contact the police. They don't hesitate to contact law enforcement officials, right? And they're not allowing that behavior in the rental community because it does impact others. It makes other tenants uncomfortable. It makes other tenants feel unsafe, like they don't want to be there. And so if a landlord does nothing, that could potentially put them in a position where they're now negligent. Let's say something happens and maybe a neighbor is trying to intervene. And so maybe the neighbor is attacked, right? And so it could go so many ways, so bad, so fast. That's why it's important that people understand, Keith, I'm going to keep going back to it. You said, if you see something, say something. Please don't be afraid. And I want tenants to understand, whether you're a tenant or you know someone who is in some sort of domestic violent situation, please don't take matters into your own hands. There are resources available. As a matter of fact, because of domestic violence, there is housing resources available. VAWA, Violence Against Women Act, right? That's available. So people who are participating in some sort of maybe housing subsidy program, this act allows victims, if they have to break their lease, to break their lease. Here's what I want landlords to know and understand about a VAWA situation. If you have a tenant that is in some sort of domestic violence situation, they get assistance. It's documented through VAWA that they are able to move. They are actually able to break the lease because their life may be in danger, right? And so I know some landlords are not happy about a tenant breaking the lease. Let's say a tenant moves in, they've only been there for 3 months, Keith, right? And it's taken you maybe 9 months or longer to lease this property up. You get a tenant in, they've only been there for 3 months. Now all of a sudden they want to break the lease. I've had landlords said, no, you can't break the lease. Well, the VAWA Act prohibits landlords from forcing tenants to stay in that rental property. And so that's something else that I want landlords to know.
That's very good information. I didn't know that. So that's I'm glad you said that. I need to make sure I remember that and put the information in my memory. So, and make some notes of it, because I'm glad you said that. That was okay. What is it called? VAWA Act, you said?
VAWA. Yep. Yep.
Okay.
So I am going to get some information and put that link in the comment section so that people can see it. And so Keith, I want you to share your information, and before we move any further, please let us know if you have any other questions, any comments, any remarks or observations. Put in the comment section. I see some people are just tuning in. So we're talking about domestic violence and how it impacts landlords as well as tenants. Keith, if any questions come up, I'm going to let you answer the questions. And so let us know where you're tuned in from. If you are a landlord, if you are a tenant, here is a number for the National Domestic Violence Hotline. This is a nationwide number. All right. This is what I want people to know. Landlords, please capture this information and share it with your tenants. Keith, give the tip again to the people on how you put that information in your lease package and why it's important for you to do that.
Yes, this what I do is I'm actually I went online just like Karissa just said, and I found the National Domestic Violence Hotline, www.ndvh.org. To go to the website, that's the number there. But what I have done is I've put a package together along with. I went to the local police. You have as landlords, we have to do a little research, to help our tenants. So I went to the police department and found out who else was the liaison for the outreach for that community. Build that relationship, put those numbers in there, and you want to get them so much information online about domestic violence. Just print some stuff out that they can read. There's some numbers that they can call. I actually created a whole little cheat, a little one pager that got different numbers on because. If someone is in an extreme situation where they need to move and need someone safe, there's numbers for. If someone just need to talk to someone about suicide or they're talking about domestic violence or talk about abuse, you want to give them all those numbers just so you know. And sometimes they just need people to talk to. So you want to create that, if you can, create that liaison with your local police station outreach department, and they would love to help. So definitely do that for all your tenants.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So let me share information on VAWA. And again, that's the Violence Against Women Act. So let me share that. And please make sure that you check out this website. Keith, you can look it up. VAWA stands for Violence Against Women Act.
Yeah, I'm going to write it down in the budget. VAWA, okay.
Mm-hmm. All right. And this is the website for VAWA. So you can get more information, look it up. The Violence Against Women Act, it creates and supports comprehensive, cost-effective responses to domestic violence, sexual assault, dating violence, and stalking. And so this was enacted in 1994, as a matter of fact, Keith, by the Department of Justice, Health and Human Services, and it has improved and it's changed dramatically over the years. And so if you are a landlord, please remember this term, VAWA, VAWA, Violence Against Women Act. But it's not just for women, because I've had tenants who were males, and so it covered them as well. So it's not just for women.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Some great information, Karissa. Appreciate that.
All right. And then also, I just want to share the number that people can text. So if you don't want to contact the police department, you don't want to dial 911, you can actually text this number, and the National Domestic Violence Hotline, someone will respond.
Oh, that's good. Okay. And that's connected directly to the domestic violence hotline?
Yes.
Text. Okay. Text
Yeah.
smart 88788.
Yes. Text the word SMART to that number 88788.
All right.
All right. Hey, Lyric, thank you so much for chiming in. So Keith, do you have any last minute tips that you want to share? Any closing comments? And then also, before you do that, Keith, I just want to remind everybody, if you know someone who needs assistance for domestic violence, Google domestic violence resources and then put in the area that the rental property is in, right? Or wherever the location is. So if it's DC, do a search domestic violence resources in DC or domestic violence resources in South Carolina. It's going to pull up all of the organizations. It's going to pull up all the entities that offers assistance for people experiencing domestic violence. So I hope that this was helpful. Landlords can also search local domestic violence intervention programs. You can do a search for this, and it will pull up resources. It will pull up intervention programs if people need shelter, if people need a place to run to. These are resources that are available in the community. And so, Keith, I do appreciate you sharing, you know, how you put that in your lease package. And so, if you would, Keith, share with our viewers what you put in the lease package, why it's important, and any last comments that you want to share.
Okay, sure. Yes. Well, let me just say too before we get out of here, Karissa, this is a awesome uh, uh, topic for us to be speaking about today on your forum. I appreciate you having me on. But yeah, so for the tenants, as a landlord for our tenants, you want to put all this. So it's a pleasure to information out here, guys, that we can give to our tenants. So you want to research it, just print it off. There's numbers like Karissa just spoke about. I'm looking at some stuff here now. There's tons of numbers for, that's pertaining to domestic violence. You want to give that information to them. You want to also connect them. What I did, like I said, what I suggest, you want to go over to your local police station and build that rapport with whoever deal with the outreach liaison person is, and it's usually the outreach liaison person over there. Also, almost forgot. Put together, if you have a community, I don't know how big it don't matter what size your property is, but if you have a community room, or if you want to put something together as a community, you can reach out to some of these, a lot of these companies, right? And they would love to come to your community and speak. So you can put together a day. You can have a day that you can have all your tenants. You can invite them out to have like a little symposium set up, and have people table giving out pamphlets and information. They can actually talk to individuals from that. So that's something you can do. Is you want to go that step further. If you have a community room, set that up at your property. Just as you would do a fun day. You maybe set something up. You can call it, name it, whatever you want to name it, but you can give information out and have live people there that can even dwell down deeper than we can, because they do it. They do it day to day. So that's something else you can offer to your community.
That's great. Thank you so much for that, Keith. As a matter of fact, when I shared information a few weeks ago, someone did the same thing. They had a monthly meeting and they called, all of their residents out. And so that's a good way to share information. So whether it's in person or even in a newsletter, Keith, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you're a landlord, if you have tenants, please include this information. Maybe send your tenants a newsletter, whether it's a physical newsletter or a digital newsletter. There is always a way to get this information out. Or even if you offer a text service where you text your tenants, text them this information that we share today. Text them that number for the hotline. Text them the number for the text service that's provided, right? As well as just let them know that you're there for them. If they sometimes, Keith, sometimes people don't want to pick up the phone and call 911, right? Because that would be obvious that they're trying to get help. And so if they could text somebody, that's a good resource and outlet as well.
Also, too, Karissa, that we got away from, right? And I noticed that communities I work for have worked at before is very powerful. When as landlords, if we create a community atmosphere, other people start looking out for each other, because usually people go in apartments, they don't talk to each other, they don't know each other, but it's really on us as leaders to create that, do stuff to bring the kids together, bring the families together, and people start intermingling and talking, and they may feel someone there that they can talk to a little better. So that's always good to get interactive with your tenants. Do that, have maybe, like you say, start out every month, once a month, do a community day, do a meeting. A little bit of people show first, and then as it grow, people start getting more comfortable. They'll come down. They want to, you got to control it, because it become, people just want to complain, but you want to get there. So you really want to hear, you want to feel what's going on with the community, and people will respect that more when they know that you care about them.
That's so true. And then it also sends a positive message throughout the community because people recognize that you really care about your
Right.
community, you know, whether you're owning it or you're managing it or you're just part of it. People will always respect, well, let me not say that. People usually respect individuals who are trying to make a positive difference. I had to change it up quickly, Keith, because
Right.
sometimes people
Well,
sometimes
right.
people don't respect, you know.
Right.
Sometimes
Well, the
people
good
don't
thing
want
today,
others to care.
right. The good thing to that, Carissa, is so true. People will forget what you did, but they never forget how you made them feel. So
Absolutely.
go for them. If you know, people will forget what you did for them, but they will never forget how you made them feel. So if you do stuff and you care in a moment, or you just care for a person, that people won't forget that.
Absolutely. Hey, Sam, thank you so much for tuning in and happy Monday. So, Keith, again, I just want to say thank you so much. You shared so much information. It has
Thank
been a
you.
pleasure. Keith, I got to get you to come back. Maybe
Absolutely.
the three of us, you, Joe, and myself, will have to come back and share
Let,
more information.
let's
Um,
do it.
absolutely. So, thank you so much, Keith.
Thank you,
Um,
Carissa. Thanks for having me.
So, guys, listen, I thank you so much for tuning in. This is what I do each and every Monday at 7:30. October is all about domestic violence awareness. I hope that something that we shared today was helpful for you. If you are watching a replay, thank you so much. If you need to reach me when I am not online, please feel free to email me. Let me pull up my email address. You can email me, carissaspann@gmail.com. I am a landlord and tenant coach. Please let me know what jurisdiction the rental property is in. Throughout the month of October, every Monday at 7:30, we're going to continue. We're going to further the conversation about domestic violence because it's a conversation. It's a much needed topic that is so important. And a lot of people don't really understand how serious it is. And so today, my special guest was Keith Childs. He is an author. He shared how at one of his properties, his tenant was killed. And so there are some things that the community can do. There are some things that landlords can do that may potentially save somebody else's life. Being a landlord is so much more than collecting money at the beginning of the month. Sometimes it does require us to go above and beyond to show that we actually care. All right. And so, again, I thank you so much for your time. I know that last week I shared because many of you asked about my next landlord class. It is coming up October the 24th. If you need information, if you want information, it's a 6-week class. Please email me. That's my email address on the screen. Please share this information. This is what I do each and every Monday at 7:30 to help landlords and or tenants. But overall, I do this because it helps the entire rental community. I've been in the industry for almost 30 years and nothing escapes me. I'm a property management educator. And so anything pertaining to landlord and tenant issues is really near and dear to my heart. So again, I just want to say thank you so much for showing up today. Please continue to show up. Please share this information with somebody because it may save somebody's life. Every Monday at 7:30 p.m. This is where you can find me. Again, my time is up. I thank you for yours and I look forward to seeing you all next week.